Welcome. I'm Nick Sholley, in for Daedalus Howell, and this is 707. Our guest today is Art Whyte, who is a writer, has been a health store owner, and actor, of course. Right. How could we forget? And most importantly, a dad. So he's here with us today to discuss, among other things, his book, which we'll get to a little later, Children of the Stars, Book 1, SAIQA, and he'll tell us all about that. But first, I really wanted to get an idea of how you got here.
In terms of where the book is right now and where I'm from, I think I've always wanted to write something based on science. When I was in college, I started school as an aeronautical engineer, and I met a...
What college did you go to?
The first college I went to and where I started that was at Prince George's Community College in Maryland. Okay. And that's where I met a really quite beautiful girl named Renee, and became very enamored, and she was a singer and pulled me into the entertainment world, and then I fell into that and just loved it, and had stayed with it ever since, till about 6 years ago when I got my daughter full time, and that's when I let it go and began working on this novel. But it was a wonderful career. I had a great time doing it. It taught me a lot about myself. There's a lot of self-searching and work to be an artist, and to go out there and perform in front of a lot of people. You need to really need to know and be grounded and disciplined, and so. Well,
discipline really shifting to writing from acting. So
yes.
Could you talk a little bit about that shift for you 6 years ago?
Yes, I was working in the community around here in Sonoma County. I was performing. I also was teaching the after-school programs in Sonoma County and North Marin County in the middle school age, doing theater programs, and it was really very rewarding. I just loved doing that with the kids, especially that age group. But when I owned my store ended up falling apart due to economic issues, and when that happened, unfortunately my marriage fell apart, and so we ended up going separate directions. We're still really good friends, but we ended up going separate directions. For a while, Ginny, my wife, had Tara, but Tara wanted to be with her daddy, and we finally got that resolved. And about 6 years ago, I was getting her into the house, and I realized that it didn't feel right as a dad to go out and rehearse, 4 or 5 nights a week when my daughter was at home alone, or bringing her with me, where she would be doing her homework and be completely bored in the back of the theater. So at some point I realized that I need to be creative, but the acting's not working. So I started a novel that's been in the back of my mind for a very long time.
And you had to earn a living at the same time?
Yes, I had to earn a living at the same time, which I'm still doing. I manage a store right now, Shelton's, in Healdsburg, and I am their nutritional expert, and the science that I started off with many years ago is what I am. It's part of what makes the book, I think, intriguing. It's based on hard science and real science, and that's how I approach all my healthcare issues with the people that come inside the store and looking for questions. If I don't know what or how something works, I can't recommend it or suggest it to somebody. There are people who have come in and asked me about muscle testing, and I've been basically like, I can't help you.
So you're a guinea pig.
I'm a guinea pig. I'm a guinea pig. Yes, I am in many ways.
All these ideas: nutrition, quantum theory,
yes,
aeronautical, sort of cutting edge. You describe yourself as a Monday morning scientist.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I think as I got into the novel and as I got into my nutritional career, Again, as I said, everything has to be based on some clinical study. It has to have some reality based in it, to me, based on some empirical evidence. And by doing that, it satisfies my scientific mind. And I think because of that, I just continuously engaged in learning and researching and learning and researching. And in that sense, I call myself a Monday morning quarterback because I don't have a degree in science. Mm-hmm. But I can sit down and talk with a scientist on somewhat of a level of understanding. For example, the research into this novel, and part of the reason it took 6.5 years to write it, is because I wanted to base it on hard science. I have done well with it, and actually had a person come into the store the other day, and she told me, you just rocked the science, you did great. Mm-hmm. And she was effusive, and I said, thank you. She said, you don't understand. I am a microbiologist. I am an expert on primate evolution. I taught at the PhD level at UCLA. You rock the science. I went, cool.
So you're still performing. You've got, there's a performative aspect. You're presenting some hard science in a fictional context.
Yes.
And it sounds like you managed to meld art and science together. The science of
people, of characters, right. of creating these characters that
in these situations,
and these tough situations, and sometimes dangerous, and in a couple of situations deadly issues, in situations where, I mean, I remember one character who I just loved, and when I finally had to have him meet his demise, I was crying because I knew
there's an emotional attachment. There's a realness to that.
There really is.
Yeah.
I mean, these characters are part of my life. When I go to work, in the back of my mind, they're still talking.
Can you talk a little bit about sort of earlier life, sort of how kind of a lot of these, you mentioned finding theater, and it really hooked you in a way that you recognized you could get this sense of connection to people and to the audience, and approval. There's some approval seeking too.
Yes, my family, well, tragically, was rather abusive, and as it is, a lot of the kids left. I know I left at 17 years old, and I never really knew what it was to be an adult, or how to even be a kid, because so much of it was...
How many brothers and sisters did you have?
I have 2 sisters and 1 brother who tragically took his own life. So, so a lot of the situation that happened in the family was not good, and so for me, I had to learn not only to be an adult, but also how to be a kid. So. Wow.
So we're going to take a break right now. But we'll be right back with Art Whyte. Hey, welcome back. We're talking with Art Whyte, and he is a writer and actor and father, yes, among other things, and want to touch upon a couple of the things that we mentioned. One is how being an actor really influenced your understanding of character, your ability to write character, and how that might have
that was a big influence, and the way I built the characters in this novel. As an actor, not only are we vocally important, of course, that's part of the story, but visually we're equally important in telling the story and the characters and identifying the characters and what have you. So I know that when I worked on this novel and I was developing the characters, I had in my head a vision of what they looked like, and a vision of how they moved, and a vision of how they wore their hair, and created a history of where they came from and what their childhood was like, and how they got to the position that they are on the Great Space Station Sanctuary. And the other part of it too, I mean, as an actor, that was always there. I have to say, when I started writing the novel, I had this idea, and who knows where it was going to end, because the characters ultimately tell you where a novel is going to end. And I got stuck on chapter 1 for quite a while. And I just went, okay, I need to find out what a professional, somebody who's already established, history of writing, what they do in a situation like this. And I stumbled through a couple of books, but I landed on Stephen King's book on writing, which, if you have not read, it's brilliant. brilliant book. It's a partially autobiography by Stephen King, but also talks about writing in very clear terms. But one of the things he said, which struck me and really helped me develop this this novel, was that you should write, 9 to 10 chapters before you rewrite. Because by the time you reach the 10th chapter in your writing, your characters are going to tell you where the story's going.
Right, right.
And then go back and do the rewriting. And it was brilliant because I just let things go, and then I was working on chapter 3 or 4, and there was this line that one of the major characters says in chapter 1, or one of the protagonists says to one of the major characters, she says, "How do you know all this?" And I went, "That's really a good point. How does she know that?" And then it became very clear that she was an important character in the novel, and from there her story, her life, her character just took off.
Is that a little bit like the process of discovery in acting?
It's totally,
developing character?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I totally think it is. I mean, when you're doing an acting role and you're going over the lines and you're reading them and they're words, and you're reading them and then they're words, and you're reading them and then they're an idea behind the words, and then you're reading them and all of a sudden the idea and the emotion and the intent of the story becomes real, and then you live it and you become part of that intent. And
it becomes behavior.
And it becomes behavior, and then you tie it into your own personality, But part of you is obviously part of that character, part of my experience, part of my knowledge, part of my my love and care for other people. I mean, everything that makes up part of me is part of that character, and is part of the characters in the novel.
I'm also, aware of how, having read part of the book, I have to confess, I'm still digging through it. It's a lot of science and interesting ideas too that are some are relatively new to me, and things about life extension, and this kind of brings me back to nutrition, because it seems like there's the connection there between taking care of our nutritional needs and how to properly care for our genes underneath all of that.
Yes.
And the aspect of nourishing, it seems like there's a theme there with the way that you took time off to care for your daughter Tara, and the way that you've kind of nourished this novel into existence, and your sense of connection to these characters, and also really this aspect of your life that's about nutrition, which one would not associate necessarily with acting, which tends to be kind of a grab-and-go sort of lifestyle, where you're lucky to get a burrito before the evening performance, and also tying it in with the scientific aspect.
Yes.
Don't always think of scientists as being the healthiest people either. So,
no, you don't, and it's kind of ironic because a lot of scientists are not, even though they're obviously very intelligent. Just to segue for a second, I have a friend who is now doing her PhD program in ocean environmental studies. And she goes out into the ocean with these scientists as part of her studying, and they're throwing candy wrappers and stuff overboard. And she's like, "You guys, why are you doing that? We're out here trying to save the ocean, and you're throwing your garbage off the side of the boat. There's a trash can over there." So it's kind of interesting and ironic how some scientists are out to save the world, but they're not saving themselves. But nutrition...
Sometimes it's hard to focus on both things at once.
Sometimes it is, yes, I agree.
Especially as our consciousness is going this way, and our body is connected very much to the earth. And sometimes we're not as connected mind-body as we might be.
I agree. And there's a lot of, and that's probably why there's such great religions like Buddhism out there, because that does help you connect, and meditation, which helps you connect. And in the novel, which you haven't seen yet, but in the epilogue, where the other alien race, their religious or their connection to each other is through what is called teachers. And the teachers are allowed to go anywhere in the space station of the aliens, and their job is to listen. And anybody can tell them anything, knowing that it will never be repeated. And their job is to listen. And then when somebody wants advice, they teach.
So was there a teacher that inspired you?
I was fortunate. I had some really good teachers, yes. Funnily enough, one of them goes all the way back to 4th grade, Mr. Kruger, who was just a teacher I'll remember forever. He was caring, strict when he needed to be, focused. He loved his job, and it was really an important part of my young era when I was in a tumultuous home life, to see somebody who was grounded and loving and caring, but focused, and that was an influence. Yes, not too many. And sadly, there's not too many male mentors out there in our world today, but most of my close friends end up being my mentors.
Can you name some of the mentors, novelists or writers or scientists or other professors or teachers?
By name, for teachers, not a whole lot. There were good, not to say there weren't good teachers. I had really good teachers here and there, but I don't remember them like I do Mr. Kruger. But in terms of writers, there's, obviously great writers out there. Isaac Asimov was a big influence on me.
Okay.
And the way he told the story, especially the Foundation trilogy, which was really, really profound. And then as a kid, I needed to escape, so I always found science fiction novels that were really, youth-oriented, grab those and then go up in a tree and pretend I was in a spaceship.
Ursula K. Le Guin, the Jetsons.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
All right, we'll be taking a break right now, but we'll come back with Art Whyte. Welcome back. We're talking with Art Whyte. And we left off talking about your science fiction influences, writers who'd influenced you. Not necessarily science fiction, but maybe just in general. And that brings us to the book.
Yes.
I wanted to spend a little bit more time. This is the book, The Children of the Stars, Book 1, SAIQA. And SAIQA is the name of the computer.
She's the artificial intelligence that runs the giant space station. Excuse me.
Sanctuary,
which is about 1.5 kilometers long, about a little over half a kilometer wide. There's 50,000 people living on the station.
So when I read the portion of the book I read and I came across SAIQA, I was thinking, wow, this is like HAL. She's an acronym.
She is an acronym.
I'm not sure what HAL was an acronym for. It was just IBM, one letter back. But SAIQA is an acronym.
Yes.
And that is?
Sanctuary's Artificial Intelligent, let me start that again. Sanctuary's Artificially Intelligent Quantum Administrator.
So quantum administrator.
Yes. Yes.
So this brings us to the glossary, because there are a lot of concepts in the book that may not be readily available to everyone the way they were available to your scientist friend who read it and said you got it spot on.
Right.
So what would we need to know about quantum theory to tackle this?
In terms of the novel, you really don't need to know much about quantum theory at all. Okay. What I do is I touch base on it a little bit under Professor Carrington's ability to create the complete standard model of physics. And in that sense, I leave it up to the reader to decide if they want to go further into that.
Okay.
Quantum mechanics is a burgeoning science and will continue to be an influence science for the next 20 or 30 years. It is where we are touching the second dimension of space. And that's why the third dimension, relativity, doesn't fit, because we're in another area altogether. In quantum physics, you can have a qubit over here, or an electron over here, or out in space, which they have tested. And you can touch the electron on Earth, and at the same time, they can see it being touched in space.
The other one's affected.
The other one's affected at the exact same time.
So it could be separated by a galaxy, or
could be separated by a galaxy. It's a mystery. Yeah. It really is, and I think
so. The second dimension, meaning that they're touching, but they're not touching. So they may be touching in 2 dimensions, but in 3.
They're not touching.
They're not touching.
No, they're only touching in second dimension or in quantum. And I think that's, as we have learned, and it was recently discovered, that explains a lot of the third dimension issues, which is where gravity and time and space and time are separated, primarily because of gravity. But the mystery was, why is gravity so weak when it really is a super strong force? And now they've determined that gravity actually exists through multi-dimensions. And the strength of gravity is because it's multidimensional, and the weakness that we feel it is only because we're feeling it or understanding it in the third dimension.
It's a little bit, kind of tie all this together. This may seem crazily artificial, but there's a way in which we are quantum as beings, because things that happen to us in our childhood or infancy are still connected to our here and now experience in a different kind of sort of personality quanta. I mean, you've talked about your childhood and how it influenced you and how it led you through this kind of self-directed healing that your life has been about through theater, through nutrition, through being a parent.
Yes.
Being a father is, of course, a huge part of that. And now with this novel, 97,000 words.
Yes.
Plus the glossary now, which will add a few thousand more, it looks like. So can you speak about that, about how all of this contributes, all these different parts that are touching in the second dimension of being into the third dimension of being?
I think the simple answer is that everything is relative. I mean, that's the simple answer. And what you do with that is how you identify your growth as a human being and on this plane and in consciousness. I mean, in the novel I talk about consciousness because SAIQA eventually comes into complete self-awareness. And the brilliant scientist is Tafiti and Dalila. He believes in panpsychism. And panpsychism is part of a theory of consciousness that everything is conscious, and that we just discover and learn more about the conscious things around us, which would explain prophets because they're more consciously aware of everything around them as compared to you or me by any stretch of the imagination. But as you, as a human being, become more aware of something, your immediate reaction, I've learned something, but really, in essence, you've just become part of a greater consciousness. And I think that in terms of what you're saying, from the quantum, from the beginning to the end and wherever, I don't think you should ever stop learning. That would be a crime. You only have one life. Don't stop learning. You should always learn.
Well, some would say that we're learning regardless.
We hope, right?
We hope. Well, yes. I mean, there's more and more input, so
yes.
At some point that's changing us.
Yes,
and
I think
that's new knowledge.
And part of that just becomes another growth in your own personal being and hopefully for the better. I know that sometimes that means you have to sit down and feel the pain. Sometimes you just have to.
You have to.
I mean, it's important.
So this notion of connection and sharing too, do you see yourself in some ways as a teacher in all of this?
My goal when I wrote the novel was to make people think. That was my goal.
Okay.
That was my conscious goal. I don't know what the right word is for it, but that was the goal that I would hoped would happen. Okay. And so far, based on the feedback, that has happened, and I'm very happy about that.
And you're learning too.
And I am learning a tremendous amount. Yes, I
notice conspicuously. This is book one.
Yes,
so there's a book two coming.
Yes.
Now is that?
Yes.
Have you started it?
Oh yes, I have. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. I have, and my goal is to actually finish this story in book two, which will probably be another 100,000 words or more, based on what's going to happen and how my characters grow and learn and where they end up. But I also intend to leave the end of the story in such a way that I can do any spin-offs that I want, much akin to what Asimov did with Foundation and iRobot. Right. So that's my goal. So in this took 6.5 years. Do you feel like the next book will take that long, or you think you're in the flow now? Yeah, I think it'll only take about 2 years to finish, primarily because the characters are established and I know where they're going. The science is already established. I don't have to dwell too much on the science anymore in terms of explaining things. Actually, by the end of the story, by the end of book one, you see very little reference to science except for when the protagonist alien, the immortal alien Talus, comes in, then you'll see some more science come in.
Wow! So I've got some reading to do. Our viewers have some reading to do.
Right.
Thank you very much, Art.
Thank you, Nick.
For coming to join us and talking with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for the time.
Yes. Yes. And you've been watching 707. Thank you very much.